It was a Saturday afternoon in late July, somewhere in the mountains of Colorado, about 30 miles outside of Denver, and the sky was that perfect cloudless blue that makes you feel like you're closer to heaven than earth. Emma Richardson was 32 years old, an experienced hiker who'd been climbing these mountains since she was a teenager, and today she was tackling Eagle's Peak, a challenging trail she'd done a dozen times before. She wasn't alone. Her best friend Sarah was supposed to come with her, but Sarah had cancelled last minute because her kid was sick, and Emma decided to go anyway because she'd been looking forward to this all week, needed the solitude, needed the clarity that only came from being up high, where the air was thin and the world felt far away. Emma wasn't particularly religious. Her parents had been Methodist, but she'd stopped going to church after college, said she found more spirituality in nature than in buildings, believed in something larger than herself, but not necessarily the personal God that Christianity taught. She meditated sometimes, read books about mindfulness and Buddhist philosophy, considered herself spiritual but not religious, in that way that a lot of people do. The hike started easy. The first 3 miles were gradual incline through pine forest, and Emma made good time, stopped occasionally to drink water and take photos of the valley spreading out below her. At mile 4, the trail got steeper, rockier, and she had to use her hands sometimes to pull herself up. But this was the part she loved, the part where it required full attention, where she couldn't think about work or relationships or any of the complications of life, could only focus on the next handhold, the next step. She reached the summit around 2 in the afternoon, stood on the rocky peak with the wind whipping her hair around, and looked out at the mountain ranges stretching in every direction. Felt that familiar sense of being small and significant at the same time. She sat on a flat rock near the edge, pulled out her lunch, a sandwich and an apple, and ate while watching a hawk circle far below her. She was thinking about nothing in particular, just existing in the moment, when she heard it, a crack, not loud but distinct, and she looked down and saw the rock she was sitting on was splitting. By the way, before I keep going, drop a comment and let me know where you're listening to this story from. Emma tried to move, tried to push herself backwards off the rock, but it happened too fast. The entire slab, probably 5 feet across and weighing hundreds of pounds, broke away from the cliff face, and she was on it, falling, tumbling through air with pieces of rock around her. She screamed, not words, just sound, pure terror, and in the split second before impact she thought, this is it, this is how I die, alone on a mountain, and nobody even knows I'm here. But the impact didn't come. She felt herself falling, felt the rush of air and the spin of disorientation, and then she felt nothing, like she'd passed through something, like she'd stopped existing in the normal flow of time. The sensation was impossible to describe. She was falling but also suspended, moving but also still, and when she opened her eyes, which she didn't remember closing, she was hanging in mid-air, about 20 feet below where the rock had broken off, just hanging there like someone had pressed pause on reality. Emma could see the ground far below her, could see the rock that had broken off, smashed into pieces on the slope hundreds of feet down, could see the cliff face above her, but she couldn't feel anything holding her, no rope, no ledge, just empty air. She tried to move, and found she could slightly, like she was floating in water, but there was no water, and the strangest part was she wasn't afraid anymore. The terror had vanished the moment the falling stopped, replaced by a profound calm that didn't make any sense given the situation, and then she heard it. Not a voice exactly, but something like a voice, something that bypassed her ears and spoke directly into her mind. Emma, you are not done yet. She looked around, saw nobody, saw nothing except mountain and sky, and she said out loud, her voice shaky, "What is happening? Who are you?" The voice, if you could call it that, came again, gentler this time, almost amused. "You know who I am, Emma. You've been looking for me in the mountains your whole life, and now here I am, holding you between life and death because it's not your time." Emma started crying, not from fear, but from something else, overwhelming emotion she couldn't name, and she said, "God? Is that you? I didn't think you were like this. I didn't think you were real like this." The presence, because she could feel it now, surrounding her, supporting her, spoke again. "I am more real than anything you've ever known. I am the ground beneath your feet, and the air in your lungs, and the love you've been searching for in all the wrong places. And Emma, I am saving your life right now, because you have a purpose. Because there are people who need you, because your story isn't finished." Emma felt herself being moved, not falling but being lifted gently, carefully, like invisible hands were carrying her, and she was placed on a narrow ledge about 15 feet below where she'd been hanging, a ledge she hadn't seen from above, a ledge that was barely wide enough for her to stand on, but solid, real, safe. She pressed herself against the cliff face, her legs shaking so badly she thought they might give out, and she looked up at where she'd been suspended and down at where she could have fallen, and the mathematical impossibility of what just happened hit her. She'd been falling, should have hit the ground, should be dead, but instead she'd been caught mid-air by something she couldn't see and placed on a ledge she didn't know existed. She stood there for a long time, couldn't have said how long, just breathing, trying to process, and the presence was still there. She could feel it, warm and patient and somehow amused, like a parent watching a child figure something out. Finally she said, "What do I do now? How do I get down?" And the voice came back, clear as if someone was standing next to her. "You climb, Emma, one step at a time, one handhold at a time, and I will guide you. Just trust me, just follow where I lead." Desati. So Emma started climbing, not up because up was impossible. The rock face above her was sheer, but across, traversing the ledge, and she found that if she moved carefully, feeling for holds, testing each one before committing her weight, the mountain seemed to cooperate, seemed to offer exactly what she needed, exactly when she needed it. A crack for her fingers here, a small protrusion for her foot there, and she made her way across the face of the cliff, moving laterally until she reached a spot where the angle was less steep, where she could actually climb down. It took her 2 hours, 2 hours of careful, deliberate movement, and the whole time she felt accompanied, felt guided, felt like someone was showing her where to put her hands, where to step, keeping her safe. When she finally reached the trail about a quarter-mile below the summit, she collapsed on the ground and sobbed, not from exhaustion, though she was exhausted, but from the overwhelming reality of what had happened, from the undeniable truth that God, who she'd spent years keeping at arm's length, treating as a concept rather than a person, had just saved her life in the most literal, physical, impossible way. She pulled out her phone, which miraculously hadn't broken in the fall, and called Sarah, and when Sarah answered, Emma couldn't speak for a minute, just cried, and Sarah said, "Emma, what's wrong? Are you okay?" And Emma said, "God just saved my life, Sarah. God caught me mid-air and put me on a ledge and guided me down, and I know how that sounds, but it happened. I'm not making this up. It happened." Emma hiked the remaining miles down to the trailhead as the sun was setting, and when she got to her car, she just sat in it for a long time, staring at the mountain, trying to reconcile the person who'd started up that trail 7 hours ago with the person who'd come back down. That person, the morning Emma, had believed in a vague universal consciousness, had thought God was a metaphor for the interconnectedness of all things, had been spiritual but not religious. This person, the evening Emma, knew with absolute certainty that God was real, was personal, was powerful, had arms that could catch you when you fell, and a voice that could speak peace into terror, and a purpose for your life that wouldn't let you die before it was fulfilled. She drove home in a daze, and when she got there, she didn't know what to do with herself, felt like she should tell someone, but didn't know who would believe her. She called her mom, who she hadn't talked to about God in years, and said, "Mom, I need to tell you something, and I need you to just listen and not think I'm crazy." And she told her everything, every detail. And when she finished, her mom was quiet for a long moment and then said, "Emma, I've been praying for you for 15 years, praying that God would reveal himself to you in a way you couldn't deny. And he just answered that prayer, and I'm so grateful you're alive." Days, they both cried, and Emma said, "I don't know what to do now. I don't know what this means for my life." And her mom said, "It means you start seeking him, really seeking him, not as a concept but as a person, because he clearly has something he wants to do through you." Emma started going to church the next Sunday, felt awkward and out of place, didn't know when to stand or sit, didn't know the songs, but she went back the next week and the next, and she started reading the Bible, started with the Gospels, because she wanted to understand who Jesus was, this God who would catch someone mid-fall. She met with a pastor, told him her story, and he listened without skepticism, without trying to explain it away. And he said, "Emma, you've experienced what very few people experience, a direct physical intervention from God. And that's a gift and a responsibility, because now you know, and you can never unknow, and he's going to ask you to share this, to be a witness." 3 months after the fall, Emma went back to Eagle's Peak, this time with Sarah and a small group from her church, and they hiked to the spot where the rock had broken off. Emma showed them the ledge where she'd been placed, and they all looked at it in silence, because you could see from the ground that there was no way to access that ledge, no way to get to it except from above, and no way anyone falling could have caught it. The pastor who'd come with them, a man named David, who was also an experienced climber, examined the cliff face for a long time and finally said, "Emma, from a technical climbing perspective, what you're describing is impossible. That ledge is inaccessible, and even if you'd somehow caught it during a fall, the impact would have broken bones or knocked you off. But you're saying you were placed there gently, that you weren't hurt at all?" Emma nodded. "Not a scratch, not a bruise, nothing." David said quietly, "Then God didn't just save you. He suspended the laws of physics to do it. He held you outside of normal reality, and I don't even have words for that." They prayed together on that spot, thanked God for Emma's life, dedicated it back to him, and Emma felt something shift inside her, felt a call she'd never felt before, a pull toward purpose. When they got back down, she told David, "I think I'm supposed to share this story. I think that's part of why it happened, so people know that God is real and active and involved." David smiled. "I think you're right, and I think you're going to find that there are a lot of people who need to hear what you have to say." Emma started speaking at churches, at youth groups, at conferences, always telling the same story, always showing photos of the cliff face, the ledge, the impossible geometry of her survival. Scientists and engineers would sometimes examine the photos and measurements, and several wrote papers about the physics of what Emma described, all concluding the same thing. If her account was accurate, and there was no evidence she was lying, then what happened violated fundamental laws of motion and gravity. One physicist said in an interview, "I'm not a religious person, but I've looked at the data from this case, and I cannot explain how Ms. Richardson survived. There is no natural mechanism that accounts for arrested momentum at that height and mass. Something external to known physics intervened." Emma's story spread beyond Christian circles when a local news station did a feature on her. "Woman claims God saved her from mountain fall." The story went viral with millions of views, and Emma received thousands of messages, some supportive, some skeptical, some hostile. But she also heard from dozens of people who said that hearing her story had changed their lives, had made them reconsider God, had given them hope in impossible situations. One woman wrote, "I was planning to kill myself the day I saw your interview. I had the pills in my hand, but I watched your story and I thought, if God can catch someone mid-fall, maybe he can catch me too. And I called a crisis line instead, and I'm still here, and I'm getting help. And thank you. Emma quit her corporate job 6 months after the fall, started working full-time in ministry, specifically with people who were in crisis, who felt like they were falling with nothing to catch them. She'd tell them about that moment suspended in midair, about the terror that turned to peace, about the voice that said, "You are not done yet." And she'd say, God is in the business of catching people who fall, of suspending them between life and death and saying, not yet, not like this, I have plans for you, and you need to trust him, you need to let him carry you because he will, I promise you he will. Indeed, today, 5 years later, Emma is 37, leads a non-profit that works with people in crisis situations, and she still goes back to that mountain every year on the anniversary of her fall. She stands at the base of the cliff and looks up at the ledge, and she thanks God for catching her, for loving her enough to break the laws of physics, for proving himself real in the most undeniable way possible. She's led hundreds of people to faith by sharing her story, has seen lives transformed by the simple message that God is real, and God intervenes, and God has a purpose for every person he creates. The church where Emma first started attending has a photo in their lobby, a photo of that cliff face with the ledge circled, and underneath it a plaque that reads, "When you fall, he catches you." Emma's testimony, July 2019. Widely, new visitors ask about it and church members tell the story, and it's become part of the culture of that community, this belief that nothing is impossible with God, that he can and does intervene in physical reality to save his children. If you're listening to this story right now, and you feel like you're falling, like you've lost your grip, and there's nothing to catch you, like you're in free fall with the ground rushing up to meet you, I need you to hear what Emma learned on that mountain. God can suspend you between life and death, can hold you in impossible space, can catch you when every natural law says you should hit bottom, and he can speak peace into your terror and show you the way forward one step at a time. Call out to him today, even if you've never believed in him before, even if you've spent years treating him as a concept rather than a person. Say, God, I'm falling. Catch me, save me, show me you're real, and watch what he does. He's still in the business of defying physics to save his children, still catching people mid-fall, still proving that he's God, and nothing, not even gravity, is stronger than his love. Trust him today, because he's already there, already waiting to catch you, already ready to suspend you between death and life and say, not yet, you are not done yet.